Ryan in the meeting with Republicans, but the president never answered it. So this is the first time I do believe he's ever answered it, and it was quite clever the way he tried to, but extremely unconvincing. What he said is, well, some of the money will be spent on older folks by closing what's called the donut hole in Medicaid drug prescription benefits. Well, yes, but that is still money spent in every year. That is, in fact, a new kind of entitlement in drug insurance for the elderly. It still is not the money that you would put away, which is the only way that you could extend the life of Medicare. So he tried to say, well, I'm spending it on old folks, at least a part of it, but that doesn't answer the issue. If you spend it on the young or the uninsured or the old, it's spent. It's not saved, so it cannot extend the life of Medicare.
AB, I tried to pin him down on the deem and pass rule that the House is considering, that they pass the one reconciliation rule with just one vote, and then that deems the Senate health care bill into law. He suggested that one vote will be just that, an up or down vote on health care reform, essentially saying that he's okay with the deem and pass option.
Well, remember that when he was a state senator, Barack Obama was fond of voting present. So he is a manipulator of process, to be sure, legislative rules, to be sure. I would say this. I think he's making the point. He's trying to dodge your question and the implications of hiding of a vote. And he's trying to be removed from this by saying, I'm not going to concern myself with House and Senate process right now. But he is right. Ultimately, Brett, I think, as we've had this conversation before, that, I mean, look, you vote for that rule, you're voting for the Senate bill. You're not going to go home to your tough race in your swing district as a House Democrat and say, I didn't really vote for the Senate bill. You are voting for this or you're not. And if it ends up including $100 million for a hospital in Connecticut, that's what you voted for. And so I think he's trying to keep an arm's length, but he knows that this looks bad. He knows that it is just days before this possibly becomes law. It taints the entire thing. We're now debating instead of the substance of the bill, the process, and he knows it looks terrible.
Yeah, Steve, then Juan, short answers here. We may not get Congressional Budget Office numbers tonight. It may come tomorrow, but this may push the trip back, his overseas trip. Steve, then Juan, quickly.
Yeah, well, it may push the trip back. I would expect that it might if we don't get a CBO score soon. But it was interesting that he said to you that the bill would be posted for many days. I mean, really, if we're counting, we're talking about 3 or 4. I don't consider that many days. The other thing, just quickly, that I thought was so striking was his defense of what's been called the Louisiana Purchase, something that's sort of a new defense for the White House. You know, it didn't apply to Mississippi when it was first revealed, and they only presented Mary Landrieu with the deal when it was known that she was wavering. So I think he's retroactively defending something that's not defensible.
Juan.
Well, I think, Brett, you know what? When it comes to something like that, I think he's very clear in setting a standard for the viewers here at Fox tonight and saying, listen, if you've had a natural disaster, forthwith it will apply to everybody. And I think that's a reasonable thing to say. And I disagree with Charles in terms of his response about what was going on there with the double, elimination of money. You know, what was very clear is he's saying we can't solve all the problems of Medicare, but we're going to try to do what we can at this moment.
But if you can't solve the extension of Medicare issue, you shouldn't be going around saying over and over again that what you've done is going to be solving at least a part of it. It doesn't. It makes it worse.
All right, a full transcript.
It's going to solve it.
We'll be back. We've got to wrap it up on this topic. A full transcript of my interview with the president is now available at our homepage. We will also post the entire interview on the website. Go to foxnews.com/special report. The panel returns in just a moment to talk about the Middle East and Iran. We'll see you in 3 minutes. Welcome back to the North Lawn of the White House. We wrapped up our interview with a walk and talk chat with President Obama on Israel, the subject of Iran, and, believe it or not, Tiger Woods. We're back with the panel. Charles, on his comments about Israel, your thoughts?
Well, I thought it was interesting, and when you asked him, is it a crisis, he deliberately and quickly answered no and appeared to dampen, to lower the temperature. Because remember, it's the president himself, according to his own leaks out of his own White House, who escalated this into a real crisis at the end of last week when he had the Secretary of State to call the Prime Minister of Israel and read him the riot act, really an angry and threatening phone call over the gap that had occurred earlier in the week. So there's a lot of stuff, a lot of attention behind the scenes. I think the president understands that as this is still unraveling and as the arguments are happening, at least in private, he wanted to give a public appearance of it all being cool and under control. It's not, but it was a deliberate attempt to make sure he didn't accidentally or deliberately re-escalate it, at least in public.
AB?
I agree with Charles. I think he's trying. You saw him trying to sort of hit the reset button. This is a very tough time for him to be fighting with pro-Israel lawmakers, particularly in his party in the Congress, and he's taking heat from them. And you saw him just trying to change the tone. He actually used the words, "We both sides need to rebuild trust." And as you see, Secretary Clinton heading towards a trip overseas to meet with Mideast allies, and then of course Netanyahu coming here next week, you're going to just see more of this, trying to get back to talk about the alliance and the friendship and the relationship and trying to make this go away.
Steve, on the issue of Iran, I asked him if Iran acquires a nuclear weapon before the end of his term, would his foreign policy be a failure?
Yeah, and he said no, and then said that it was one of his administration's highest foreign policy, national security priorities. I just think there's very little evidence to support the claim that he makes there. I mean, the president has spent most of the first year doing everything he could, bending over backwards to avoid offending the Iranian regime in any possible way, even at times when they were confronting him rather directly, both with their rhetoric and their actions. In the time since, we've seen him, I think, fail to support the Green movement adequately. He's done very little to destabilize the regime. Exactly the kinds of things that you would expect to see from the president if it were in fact the case that preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon was one of his highest priorities. You've even had members of his administration, the Secretary of State included, raise the prospect of a defense umbrella, using the language of containment to talk about this threat, which again suggests that it really isn't one of his highest priorities.
Juan, we asked a final question from an emailer about Tiger Woods returning for the Masters. What'd you think of his answer to that?
Well, I was surprised. He was pretty strong in saying that Woods had betrayed, that's his word, his family. You know, but I was struck by the contrast in emails. He says he gets his emails and letters at the White House. You get your emails here at Fox, and it looks like you're getting letters from a different crowd, I'll say that. But, you know, to me, on the Israeli point, just to go back to what was being discussed earlier, I think the president was exactly right to call Israel on the whole idea of expanding the settlements, and I think the U.S. governments, Republican and Democrats, have done the same, that Israel is not going to be given a free pass, especially when you have American men and women on the ground in Iraq, in Afghanistan, trying to create some kind of peaceful situation to fight a war on terror. And that sometimes the terrorists use the tensions between Israel and the Palestinians as a justification for attacking us. The United States has something of a strong stake here, and to just imagine that we're going to give a free pass to Israel to do whatever they want, any kind of incitement, would be wrong-headed. So the president says, let's calm it down. It's not that we are not totally committed to protecting Israel, but clearly something happened here, and I think the president was right to say it. And I think most Americans would say, you know what, we have our interest, and we can say exactly how we feel about the settlement issues without having to fear some repercussions because Israel is angry at us.
All right, 10 seconds, Charles. Quick rebuttal.
I disagree. We've never had a president who demanded that there be no Jewish construction in Jerusalem. That's what's new. That's why the Israelis were surprised. Netanyahu and Obama had agreed in the past no expansion outside of Jerusalem, and that's why all of this was extremely odd and unexpected.
All right, that's it for the panel. Panel, as always, thank you, but stay tuned for some holiday humor from the president before we leave. Tonight, this is St. Patrick's Day, when everyone is a little bit Irish, including President Obama, who said today at House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's St. Patrick's Day luncheon that his great-great-great-great-great-grandfather on his mother's side was born in Ireland.
Someone actually discovered my Irish lineage when I was running for president, and my first thought was, why didn't anybody discover this when I was running for office in Chicago? You know, I would have gotten here sooner.
At the green side today, no online show this evening. It will return next Wednesday. Thanks for inviting us into your home tonight, and thanks for making special